In this video, we look at where you can get your copy of Blender and the installation process. Let's get started. To secure your copy of Blender, we can come to blender.org. From here, we can open the dedicated download page. Here, you will find the latest stable version of Blender, which is heavily utilized by production studios. This particular version enjoys long-term support and is systematically updated for 2 years. So whether you are a production studio or an individual embarking on an extended project, this version will continue to receive crucial updates, patches, and bug fixes aimed at maintaining hardware compatibility. If you require a different version, there is an alternative. Click on the drop-down menu to select the version that aligns with your needs. Blender accommodates a trio of operating systems: Windows, Mac, and Linux. Should you prefer managing your applications via other platforms like Steam, Snap, or the Microsoft Store, relevant links are made available on the same download page. To explore this, right-click on the given links and choose to open them in a new browser tab. Now open this newly spawned tab. If the Microsoft Store is your chosen platform, Blender can be effortlessly downloaded and managed from here. The same benefit applies if you are utilizing Steam or Snap, and these platforms facilitate the automation of updates for Blender. Let's come back to blender.org's download page. An often overlooked feature of Blender's official website is its comprehensive archive of all previous software releases. If there was a previous feature that interested you, or you find yourself feeling nostalgic, click to navigate to the section listing these releases. Here, every previous release of Blender is available to download. These archived versions contain all types, including zipped folders, that can be run directly from their extracted folder. Having explored this, navigate back to the download page. We are now ready to download and install the latest stable release of Blender. So let's click Download Blender. For the purposes of this demonstration, a Windows desktop is the platform of choice, although the installation process remains standardized across various operating systems. This could take a few moments, so I can speed this up. Once that completes, I can drag in a file browser with the location of the Blender download. This file serves as the installer, so we can initiate the installation process by double-clicking on it. This will guide us through the installation process, so I can click Next. Then we need to read the user agreement and accept. Now click Next. Here you can specify an installation location. However, the default typically suffices, so we can click Next. Now click Install and grant any necessary administrative approvals that may be prompted. The installation of Blender will commence, and I can speed this up. Once that completes, we can click Finish. Upon successful installation, a Blender application icon will be available on your desktop, so we can double click and launch Blender. This opens up into the splash screen. If this is your first time with Blender, the splash screen offers initial settings that can be later revised in user preferences. Here you can set the user interface language, opt for keyboard shortcuts from the previous Blender 2.7, or choose industry-compatible shortcuts akin to software like Maya or Max. For this tutorial, settings will be retained at their default Blender-specific configuration. Your selection preferences for your mouse, either left or right, can be set. It's worth noting that releases prior to Blender 2.6 defaulted to right select, but left select is generally the standard. The spacebar is mapped to play and pause functionality. The theme of the Blender interface can also be adjusted here. For instance, a preset like the Blender Dark theme is a viable choice. All these user settings can be modified at any time in user preferences, and we'll be looking at these in subsequent videos. We can click Next, which reveals the splash screen that greets users upon launching Blender. This interface allows you to select the file type you wish to work with. General will be employed in this instance and serves as the default setting. The splash screen also grants quick access to Blender's official manual, or if you want to support Blender's development, you can do that with the link provided. To immerse yourself into Blender's working environment, we can click into the scene. In this video, we look at changing interface settings in Blender. Let's get started. In our previous video, we saw how these initial settings such as left select, play pause or the theme could be adjusted on setup of Blender. This was just an illustration of the numerous customizable features in Blender. Note that these options won't be available after the initial setup but can be still accessed in user preferences. To begin, we can left click into the scene and close the splash screen. Incidentally, to open back up the splash screen, come up to the Blender logo and find that button here. To open preferences, come to the edit menu and down to preferences. We can begin up top in the interface tab, specifically focusing on the resolution scale. By clicking and dragging in the resolution scale field, you'll notice the text on screen enlarging. This not only aids you in following the videos, but also helps me see what buttons I'm pushing. Adjust that if you feel it improves Blender's ease of use. If you do change a setting but later decide it's not what you expected and need to change it back, don't panic. Simply hover the cursor over the field and press the backspace key to reset the value back to its default. In this case, a value of 1. For this resolution scale setting, I'm going to left click into the field and set this to 1.3. I find this amount increases the text sufficiently for me and should make it easier for you to follow along. Next are the tooltip settings below. In Blender, if you hover the cursor on a button or property, will prompt information to appear, providing a short description. Additionally, the Python tooltip shows the Python reference, useful for getting tips about buttons and properties. Further on down here we have translation. If English is not your first language, then below you can change that from the drop-down. Then have that effect tooltips interface and new data settings. The remaining default settings are fine here. Next, we can move on to the themes tab. Up top, from the preset drop-down, choose a preset theme from the menu. This will change the entire interface color scheme. In addition to that, each interface item can have their color properties modified using the menus here, allowing you adjust the color of every aspect of the Blender interface. Let's move on to the Input tab. When working in Blender, a 3-button mouse is recommended, but a 2-button mouse can also work by enabling this option, Emulate 3-button mouse. This emulates the middle mouse button functionality using the Alt key and left mouse button. Enable this option only if you have a 2-button mouse. The middle mouse button is used to rotate and it can be difficult to work in Blender without that functionality. Next is the Navigation tab. The first setting we can enable is Orbit Around selection. This makes your selected object the center point when orbiting in object mode or when in edit mode, whatever part of the mesh you have selected. Really important enhancement to navigation that allows you to get in close and work more accurately. The second option here is Auto Perspective. This one I usually disable. This setting automatically changes the view to perspective after you leave an orthographic view. I prefer to remain in an orthographic view and manually shift my perspective if needed. Feel free to leave it at default, it's just a setting I like to disable. The final setting in navigation is Zoom to Mouse Position. This sets the cursor as the target when zooming, another great enhancement for navigation. Next, we can open the Key Map tab. We previously looked at these on Initial Setup. Up top, you can choose a Blender key configuration or industry standard. If you have come from another 3D software, you might prefer to use that setup. Setups like Maya or Max. I'd recommend the Blender configuration as it's set up for convenience and speed, and also will make it easier to follow along with the course. Next, you can also specify left or right selection. For the spacebar action, choose between Play, Tools and Search. The default Play works well as it's industry standard. Shortcuts are a major productivity enhancer in Blender, and down below are all the key bindings listed. If we expand the 3D view and 3D view global, every shortcut is listed for the 3D view. The first binding here is to Set 3D Cursor. Here we can see when the right mouse button and the Shift key are pressed, this command executes. This is where you can discover the available shortcuts or change shortcuts. If we scroll down to the very bottom of this tab, here you can actually add and assign your own shortcuts for the different commands. As we are seeing from user preferences, Blender is very customizable. I usually leave these at default in the 3D view as the shortcuts work well. However, I do add additional shortcuts within the video editor to help speed up my workflow. Let's move on to the System tab. The first setting we can look at are the number of undo steps. As we all know, these are really important in any program. In Blender especially, you can use up your lives very quickly. Increasing these, however, will lead to higher memory usage. 256 is the max, this value can be increased, and I usually set this to 100. That number generally provides enough headway that you feel confident experimenting at times. Next, we can open the Save and Load tab. Here we can look at the recent file number. This is the number of recent files that get displayed in the file menu. I find 10 too few when trying to open recent files and usually increase this to the max 30. Finally, we have the file paths. This is where you set up the source folders for the different file types. These include fonts, textures, scripts, sounds, and output files. That way, Blender will open directly into these folders. In the render area, the images you render out can also have the default folder set up here. Blender does create a temp folder by default, but you can specify one here. Applications can also be linked. An image editor such as Photoshop or GIMP can be set up to open from Blender. Finally are the asset libraries. Here you can set up paths to external asset libraries. Essentially, these are blend files that store assets. These can be models, materials, brushes, lights, cameras. Multiple libraries can be added that allow assets be dragged and drop into the scene. There will be a video on using asset libraries later in the course. That's it for the settings. Blender will automatically save any changes you make in preferences in future. That is, once the Save Preferences checkbox is enabled in here. Now the next time you open Blender, these changes will have been saved. We can close Preferences by clicking the X. The final thing is to save the file. You hear this with all applications, but do make sure and save your file often. Also, save incrementally. Blender provides a useful feature for saving incrementally, so no excuses. It's also a really good habit to get into. We can first come to File and Save. This opens a file browser. Another useful habit is to set up a project folder for the course. That way you can save all files in the same location. So let's navigate to a location where you will store all files relating to the course. Here I've created a new project folder. Inside, for example, I have the asset folder from the course resources. Later, as the course progresses, more folders for the different file types can be added. These folders can be created when needed, but the important thing is to keep all project files together at the same permanent location. That way, files aren't deleted or moved independently and links don't get broken. So now is a good time to set up your project folder. Name the folder something you will recognize. Inside this project folder, we can create a new folder to store blend files. Rename this one Blend Files. Double click inside here. In the name field, choose something that makes sense, but make sure to add an underscore 001. Having the underscore 001 not only helps you recognize the most recent file, but also makes incrementing easier. Now click Save Blend File. Then, to use the great feature Blender has for incrementing files, come back up to File, and this time choose Save As. This opens back up the file browser. The name field is highlighted red to indicate this name is already used, and we'll save over this file unless the name is changed. At the back of the name field is a plus and minus. If we click the plus, the suffix underscore 001 increases to underscore 002. That way, as you follow the course, you can easily save incrementally. Really important. If for some reason your file becomes corrupt or you encounter another issue with the file, having saved incrementally and often will allow you to take a step back without losing hours of work. We can click Save As. Now you know how that works. The next time all you need to do is come to File and down here to Save Incrementally. Blender will increase that file number by 1 automatically. This video sets out to explain how to tackle the various challenges. Each challenge relates to something we covered in the previous lecture. Let's take this first challenge and look at how you can start solving it. The text lecture outlines the challenges within the blend file. So from the resource folder, download and open this file. This was created in Blender 4, so make sure that you are using a version of Blender 4 or above if taking the challenges, or you may encounter issues when opening the file. In the 3D view, we are in a top view to start with, and each challenge is listed. Each one also has a hint that might help. If you leave this view, use the gizmo to switch back and the text will be visible again. Below here in the text editor is the Python script that will create the buttons and check if you have solved each challenge. Make this a little larger. This is behind the curtain stuff and needs to remain unchanged, but we can take a look before running it. At the start, it's importing the BPY or Blender Python module and the sleep function. Next, some assignments for the challenge and solved messages. Next is a class that creates the panel that will get created on the sidebar. After that, the following code does the check when you press the buttons, and finally at the end, the sound function. Let's come back up to the top now. To start this off, we need to click the Run Script button here. Then on the sidebar, shortcut N, a new tab was created called Challenges. Here, 3 buttons were created for each of the challenges listed. So if we take the first, have a read and try find the solution. So if you figure it out and then click challenge 1, once solved, the sound will play and the text will update to say you solved the challenge. Then you can move on to the next. Otherwise the text will remain unchanged and you need to continue trying to solve the challenge. That's it for this introduction to the challenges. If you encounter issues or have any feedback for improvements, send a message or leave a question and I'll respond as soon as possible. In this video, we look at enabling add-ons in Blender. Let's get started. The next step in setting up Blender is to enable the add-ons we'll need for the course. In Blender, add-ons are Python scripts that add functionality, enabling a multitude of varied tasks. To begin enabling these add-ons, press F4 to open the File Context menu. At the bottom, we'll find an option to open Preferences. Inside Preferences, let's navigate to the Add-ons tab, where every available add-on will be listed. If you need to understand more about individual add-ons, simply expand the corresponding tab. Each has a documentation link to give you thorough information. The first add-on we can enable is close to the bottom, so grab the slider on the right and drag down towards the bottom. Our target is the Loop Tools add-on, situated under the letter M for Mesh and labelled as Loop Tools. This add-on grants additional mesh editing functionality, which are vital when editing in edit mode for more efficient mesh object modification. To enable this specific add-on, place a checkmark in the box here. If you wish to disable it later, just remove that checkmark. Further information can be obtained by expanding it and reading the associated documentation link. In the location field below, you will find the location of the add-on. It is located in the Edit menu of the sidebar. Below in the tab category, the name field here is customizable. You can designate a custom tab by entering a name. So let's come to the sidebar. Click the button to broaden the sidebar or use the N key to toggle it open and closed. Notice that in object mode there is no edit menu, so you must be in edit mode. Therefore, select the cube or any mesh object and switch to edit mode from the mode menu up top here. Now the edit menu on the sidebar displays the Loop Tool add-on. Let's create a personal tab for this add-on in the sidebar and call it Loop Tools. Let's return to Preferences. In the name field, simply rename it Loop Tools. Instantly the tab name updates to Loop Tools. One more add-on we'll activate is called Node Wrangler. So let's come back to the Add-ons tab. It's located a bit further on down, so scroll until you find Node Wrangler. Should you face any difficulty in locating any add-on, there is a search feature up top. Input Node Wrangler and it should appear listed. This particular add-on plays a crucial role when working with materials and configuring textures, as it simplifies the texture node setup. Take the time to read the documentation for more insight into this add-on. Below you'll also find a hotkey list, so be sure to try some out. That's it for enabling add-ons, but as we progress through the course, we can enable additional add-ons as they become necessary. Let's close Preferences. When many add-ons are enabled, the sidebar can get crowded out with tabs, and that's where the add-ons filter can help you manage the add-ons more effectively. Press Tab and switch back to Object Mode first. In the Tool tab, expand Workspace. Here we can enable Filter Add-ons. This will set all to disable, and then you can enable the ones you need in the current workspace or blend file. Just be careful, as when the filter menu is enabled and the add-ons are not checked on, they will not be available. In this video, we look at how to manage and recover files. Let's get started. We previously looked at saving your file, then saving incrementally. This can help avoid losing large amounts of work. That is, once you remember to save regularly. Sometimes crashes are inevitable, or even accidental closes without saving, especially after hours of work. These moments, the next two features can truly save your project. They stand out as valuable functionalities within Blender and are worth taking note. The first feature comes into play if you quit Blender inadvertently without saving. There is a way to recover the last closed file immediately. To do that, come to File and down here to Recover. Then use Recover Last Session. This action will promptly reopen the last quit blend file. This feature could very well be the difference between losing your hard work and recovering it intact. The second feature becomes relevant when Blender crashes or shuts down unexpectedly. In that case, you are relying on the autosave option. Autosaves are essentially blend files stored in a temporary folder on your system. Blender will create this temporary folder on its own unless you specify one in Preferences, a topic we covered earlier and will revisit shortly. The autosave feature is set to automatically preserve your blend file every 2 minutes by default. Moreover, you have control over this autosave duration from within Preferences. Let's explore this further by clicking Autosave. This opens into the temp folder and the previous autosaved blend files are listed. The file path is conveniently visible at the top. Also, the time and date stamps associated with each file serve as helpful reference when identifying the file you need. If you double click on any of these files, they will open up. We can cancel this and come back to Blender. Let's investigate where to adjust the autosave duration and where to define the temporary folder's location. Press F4 to open Preferences. We can open the Save and Load tab. By default, the autosave feature is active. Blender will save the blend file based on the frequency value displayed, ranging from 1 to 60-minute intervals. With it set to 2, Blender will automatically save the file you're working on every 2 minutes. One caveat, however, is sculpt and edit mode data are not included in these saves. The recent file value we looked at in an earlier video and sets the number of recent files available to you from the file menu. This can be as high as 30, but for me, keeping it below 20 is always a challenge. Related to the first feature is where you accidentally close Blender. A save prompt will ask you for confirmation, a handy safety measure. Therefore, it's wise to keep this enabled. Additionally, you have the ability to save multiple backup copies of the blend file when performing manual saves. The default is 1, but sometimes more is better. Adjust the value below here to either increase or decrease that number. To designate the location of the temp folder, open the File Paths tab. You have the flexibility to set the location for the temp folder or simply adhere to the default location that Blender refers to. Typically, it's convenient to stick with the default, unless a specific location is needed. So the next time Blender closes unexpectedly, check the temp folder before you panic. Really great feature, particularly for those rare occasions when Blender crashes. At this point, we can close Preferences. In this video, we look at shortcut keys and where to find them. Let's get started. As we move through the course, you'll be introduced to the most commonly used tools and commands. You'll find all available tools and commands within the different menus. The Object menu, for example, has object-related commands. So to duplicate objects, we can click Duplicate Objects. This makes a copy of the cube and I can move this across and position. So every time you want to duplicate an object, you'd come to the object menu and use this command. However, you may have noticed alongside this command, the shortcut key Shift+D is displayed. So rather than clicking duplicate objects from the menu, we can press Shift+D and duplicate this way. Using shortcuts is a much faster way of working in Blender and will become part of your workflow very quickly. This means, however, you will have to remember the key combinations. To make this a little easier, I have created a shortcut guide to help practice and memorize these key combinations. I try update this regularly, and the guide can be found on the asset page of my website here, blenderzen.com. Come to the asset page. This is a PDF file, and if you click, it opens onto a new page. This guide has shortcuts for both Mac and Windows. It begins with a brief introduction, then a list of the most common keyboard shortcuts for both operating systems. You can download this file from here and even print it off to have it close by. I'd recommend taking some time and working through each command to help familiarize yourself and get up to speed more quickly. In this video, we look at navigation in Blender. Let's get started. In Blender's 3D view, to rotate around, you simply press and hold the middle mouse button. As I rotate around here, because the cube is selected, I'm able to orbit around this selection. All thanks to a setting we enabled in an earlier video called Orbit Around Selection. If we select the camera and press the middle mouse button, we'll then orbit around the camera. Really useful setting, providing not only focus but also a smoother control over your viewport. Then we have zooming. By pressing and holding Control with the middle mouse button and pushing forward and back, you can achieve a very smooth zoom. You also have the option to roll the middle mouse button to zoom, although this method offers less control over speed and it's not continuous. To pan the view, you need to press and hold Shift along with the middle mouse button, and then move the cursor. The middle mouse button and Alt key can also be utilized to switch views. First, switch into a front view by clicking the green circle on the gizmo. If you prefer shortcuts, Numpad 1 gets you into a front view, and Numpad 5 switches to an orthographic view. Your current view type is displayed at the top left, and you can switch back and forth between perspective and orthographic views using this button here. Switching views using the middle mouse button and Alt key works in both perspectives, but it's easier to demonstrate from an orthographic view. For a right view, press and hold Alt, then press the middle mouse button and drag right to left. Feels like dragging the view around. For a top view, hold Alt, then the middle mouse button and drag from top to bottom. This technique might take some practice, but it's very effective once mastered. The view gizmo offers further control when switching views. If you hover the cursor on each axis end, the tooltip will display the view. Under the view gizmo, there are controls for zoom, pan and camera. The first button will smoothly zoom the view. The button beneath will pan the view. These gizmos can be switched off using this Show Gizmo button, and the navigation controls get disabled. This can help clear your viewport. When enabled, you can limit this to just the navigation gizmos by disabling navigation here. I like this View Navigation gizmo to get my bearings, so I always leave these switched on. Below, the pan button switches you in and out of camera view. Once the camera is selected in the outliner, it's highlighted in the 3D view. You can press and hold Shift with the middle mouse button to pan around, with the camera view remaining fixed. If you try and rotate, you will leave the view. To control the camera further, press N to open the sidebar, and in the View tab, put a checkmark in Lock Camera to View. This allows you to zoom, rotate and pan from within the camera view, aiding you in capturing the perfect shot. With Orbit Around Selection enabled and with the camera selected, the target object is the camera itself. If we select the cube, then rotate, we can orbit around the cube as it's now the selected object. This feature is particularly handy for focusing on and rotating around specific objects. Moreover, you can adjust the camera's focal length and depth of field. Simply right-click on the camera for the context menu and choose Adjust Focal Length. Pushing in or out will adjust it, and the value is displayed at the top left. Right-click again to exit. To exit camera view, we can click the camera icon. If you exit camera view and find yourself far away from the object you're working on, use numpad period to frame the selected object. To frame all objects in the scene, press the Home key. The navigation commands can be found in the View menu. In the Viewport menu, the different views and their shortcuts are listed. In addition to this View menu and the gizmos, there is a shortcut to open a View Pie menu. Pressing the apostrophe key will open this menu. Then click to select a view or press the corresponding number to switch into that view. If we press the apostrophe key again, you'll also find the zoom to the selected object from this menu. In this video, we look at the 3D View Editor. Let's get started. The 3D view in Blender is the area highlighted here. It acts as both an editor and a space to interact with 3D objects. This is where you can display, modify, animate objects and perform various other tasks. On the left side of the 3D view is what's known as the tool shelf. To open it, simply use this arrow button and then you can click on the edge and drag it back to close it. You can also use the T key as a shortcut to open and close this area. Inside the tool shelf, you'll find various transformation and editing tools that are essential for shaping your 3D models. On the right side of the 3D view, you'll find the sidebar. This is where the properties related to the different objects reside. To open the sidebar, you click this arrow icon and then you can drag it back to close it. The shortcut key N is used to toggle it open and closed. Like all editors in Blender, the 3D view can be changed from the editor type drop-down, which lists the editor types available, each catering to different functions. For example, let's switch to an image editor. Notice how it instantly takes up the entire space, replacing the 3D view. Now we can go back up to the editor menu and switch it back to the 3D view. Blender is mode-based and different object types have specific modes available. If we select the cube, the modes for a mesh object become available, including Object, Edit, Sculpt, Vertex, Weight and Texture mode. Other objects, like the camera, will only have Object mode available. With it selected, we can see only Object mode from the drop-down, while armature objects can access Object, Edit and Pose mode. Using Ctrl+Tab, you can open a pie menu with the available modes for the selected object. Most often we'll be switching between Object and Edit mode, and you can do this quickly by pressing the Tab key. Your current mode will be displayed on the top left. The next menu along here is the View menu. Here, the tool and sidebar can be opened or closed. The shortcuts T and N are listed alongside. Below these, enable tool settings. This displays the available options for the current tool. So again, with the cube selected, press Tab and enter Edit mode. The tool settings relate to the currently selected tool from the tool shelf. Select different tools for those tool settings to become available on the menu here. From the View menu, if we disable this setting, those settings are hidden. We can tab back to Object mode. The asset shelf will make assets available within certain editors without needing to open the asset browser. Then adjust Last Operation. This will display the properties after an operation has been performed, if any are available, useful for adjusting the results. Below this is Frame Selected and Frame All. We saw a similar command for Frame Selected on the View menu with View Selected. Frame Selected can be useful if you find yourself lost in 3D space. Numpad 5 will switch between a perspective and orthographic view, and we saw this using the button in the viewport. Numpad / will bring you in and out of Local View. Local View lets you isolate an object. This makes editing objects much easier. multiple objects can enter local view together. When in local view, Alt plus numpad / will remove any selected object from the local view. So for example, back in the scene we can press Shift and select the second cube. Now press the / key to isolate both objects. Your current view is displayed to show local here. If we want to remove this first cube from local view, select it, then press Alt plus numpad / to remove it. The second cube remains in local view and you can continue working without the need to return to global view first. Pressing the / key again will return to global view. Coming back to the view menu, you can set the active camera. This will be the one that renders the view. Viewpoint has the different views. We saw this with the apostrophe key for the pie menu. Navigation has orbit, roll, pan and zoom controls. Also, the walk and fly commands from the navigation menu are available. Additional walk and fly settings can be found in the navigation tab in Preferences. Align View lets you align your view to selected objects or center your view. View Region lets you select small portions of the view to render and can save time rendering complete shots. Play Animation is the spacebar and that button is below on the timeline here. This can be paused here also. Other useful options on the view menu are the ability to render an image from the viewport, render a quick play blast animation, or render the keyframes if any were available. In this video, we look at selection types and the quick favorites menu. Let's get started. To begin, let's come to File and start a new general blend file. We can move on to the Select menu. When working in Blender, selecting objects or part of objects is fundamental and a constant occurrence. We previously saw how you can select objects with the left mouse button, but there are many more ways, including the first selection type here, Select All. This will select all visible objects in the scene. The shortcut for this command is the A key. Double tapping A will deselect. However, a more common way to deselect is using Alt plus A. Next, we have Invert Selection. This will deselect your selection while selecting everything else. So for example, if we select the cube here, then press Ctrl plus I to invert the selection, all other objects are selected with the cube being deselected. This is especially useful in edit mode when selecting vertices, edges or faces. Next we have Box Select and Lasso Select, and we'll be taking a closer look at these selection types in the next lecture, so we can hold off until then. Additionally, you can select objects by type, so you can select all visible mesh objects, curve, text, even empty objects using this command. Really useful if you need to apply a specific operation to all objects of a particular type. Select Active Camera, select the mirror of an object, or select Random. So if we wanted to vary the scale of trees in a forest, for example. Following this, we have Select More or Less. For this, you can use Ctrl plus Numpad plus to increase the selection, or Ctrl plus Numpad minus to decrease it. This command is beneficial in edit mode for selecting vertices, edges or faces up to a designated edge. Then select Grouped, select Linked Objects and select Pattern. We'll be using some of these commands during the course, so you'll get a practical usage at that stage. However, before we do move on, I want to highlight 3 additions to selecting. The first is adding to selections in edit mode. So select the cube and tab in here. When we say select a vertex, we left click to select it. Then if we want to add to this selection, we can press and hold the Shift key and select the second vertex. And that adds to the original selection and the 2 vertices are selected. The second is selecting the shortest path between 2 vertices. So if we select this top vertex here, hold the Control key and select this bottom corner vertex, this selects the shortest distance between those 2 vertices. The final one is Alt Select. This will select an edge loop of vertices, edges or faces. So first I'm going to press Ctrl plus R to add an edge loop. Then just left click and right click to place it center. That just adds an edge loop center here. Press Alt plus A to deselect. If we wanted to select this entire edge, we can press and hold the Alt key and left click. That will select all the vertices right the way around here. Works for edges and faces also. Let's tab back now. We can move on to the Add menu now. As the name implies, this is where you'll find the various object types you can add to your scene. In the Mesh menu, you'll find a range of primitive mesh objects, basic geometric shapes that serve as an excellent foundation for modeling. Let's add a UV sphere into the scene, a form that is a useful starting point for various modeling and saves you from shaping it manually, a task that is doable but time consuming. There are also curve objects, surface NURB objects, metaballs, text, volumes, grease pencil, armature, lattice, and empties. You have the ability to add reference and background images, light objects, probes, cameras, speakers, force fields, and collection instances. Additionally, some of the add-ons you'll find in Preferences will expand this menu even further with unique objects. Let's move across to the Object menu. The Transform menu lists an object's transformation options. Remember the keys G for moving an object, R for rotating, and S for scaling. These are perhaps 3 most frequently used commands in Blender. Following this is the Set Origin menu, Mirror menu, Clear menu, and Apply Transforms menu, and the Snap menu, all of which contain commands we will use often as the course progresses. We previously saw Duplicate objects. Another is Duplicate linked objects. Then Join objects together. This command lets you join multiple objects into one. So if we duplicate this cube with Shift plus D, these are 2 individual objects. However, if we Shift select both, notice how the last one selected is a lighter color, indicating this is the active object. This means the new object will inherit properties of the active object, such as its name, any modifiers, and location transform. So press Ctrl plus J and join this into one. When setting up, we made sure tooltips were enabled, so if you ever find yourself stuck for a command, hovering on the name will display a description. Also, alongside most, the shortcut key will be listed. Moving on down, we have Copy and Paste. These are very useful for copying values between objects. Let's see an example. In the sidebar, we can open the Item tab. Here we have the transform for the selected object, in this case, the cube. If you hover on the Scale field and press Ctrl plus C, this will copy the value to the clipboard. Now hover on the X location field and press Ctrl plus V to paste in that value. This will translate the cube to 1 along the X-axis. This copy and paste functionality extends to various elements in Blender, like copying and pasting color values, for example. Let's open back up the Object menu and continue. Next is the Asset menu, giving you the ability to mark an asset. We'll see an in-depth example of this in a later video. Then Collections menu and the commands associated with collections. An upcoming lecture will be dedicated to collections and we'll go into more detail at that stage. More commonly used tools are here in the Convert menu. This allows you to convert curve objects to mesh or mesh objects to curves. You can also convert text objects to mesh. Let's look at an example. So from the Add menu, we can come down and add text. And I'm just going to quickly rotate this on the X and Z axes so it's facing forward. Over in the Object Properties tab, in Geometry, I'm going to extrude this text a little bit so we have a little bit of thickness. If we tab into Edit mode, we'll see this is an editable line of text. You can press the backspace key to remove the text. I'll quickly type text again. If you press Ctrl plus A, it will select it all and you can press Ctrl plus V to paste in your own text. We can replace this with Example. Then tab back to Object mode. If we come to the Object menu and down to Convert, we can convert this to a mesh object. So now if we tab in here, we have a mesh object that can be modified further. Back in the Object menu, there are other commands we'll use throughout the course, but the last one I want to look at here is Quick Effect, and we can choose Quick Explode. So what that does is it adds a particle system and an explode modifier onto the selected object. In this case, the example object here. If we press the spacebar to play the animation, the text will explode. That's the object menu. You can quickly access the most common object menu items by right-clicking and opening the object context menu. This menu is mode specific, meaning only tools for the selected object that work in that mode are available. So if we tab into edit mode and right-click, the context menu displays a list of tools only available in edit mode. We can tab back to object mode. For those tools you frequently use but lack a shortcut, you can add them to the Quick Favorites menu. Press Q to open the Quick Favorites menu. Right now, the list is empty as we don't have any commands stored yet. Let's assign the selection to cursor command here. So from the object menu, open the snap menu. To add a command to the Quick Favorites menu, right-click and from here, click Add to Quick Favorites. Now in the scene, if we press Q for the Quick Favorites menu, the command selection to cursor is now available. With the sphere selected, press Q and choose selection to cursor. That will snap the cube to the position of the 3D cursor. Very useful for commands without a dedicated shortcut. Incidentally, the shortcut for the snap menu is Shift+S. Finally, we'll explore the orientation menu. Here you'll find options for global, local, normal, gimbal, view, cursor, parent, and even the ability to add a custom orientation from a selected object. Each has a specific purpose, but let's compare global and local so we get an idea. By switching on the Move tool on the tool shelf, you can use the red arrow to move the cube along the x-axis, moving it globally along the x. If you double tap R to rotate this cube randomly and left click, then move the cube along the x-axis again, it will continue to move along the global x regardless of the object's orientation. Now in the orientation menu, change the transform orientation to local and the manipulation arrow will change to align with the object's own orientation. You can then move the cube based on its own local orientation. If you switch back to global again and press X, it moves along the global x-axis. Press X again and it changes to the local axis. The current orientation is displayed on the top here. This is a really useful shortcut for switching between those two transform orientations. We'll be taking a closer look at these orientation settings later in the course. In this video, we look at proportional editing and the shading options in Blender. Let's get started. We can begin back at the pivot menu. The pivot settings are crucial when scaling or rotating objects, and these settings can vary slightly between object and edit modes. The default pivot setting is the medium point. In object mode, the origin of the object acts as the pivot, while in edit mode, the center of the selected geometry becomes the pivot, calculating its position based on the amount of geometry selected. The 3D cursor pivot scales and rotates from the position of the 3D cursor. This behavior remains consistent in both object and edit modes. Throughout the course, we'll be exploring each pivot's specific use case, providing a more nuanced understanding of these features. Next, we can move on to the snapping menu. By clicking the magnet icon, you can toggle snap on or off. With the cube selected, press G and notice how the cube snaps in increments as you move the cursor. You can cancel this movement by right-clicking. Now let's switch to a front view. Also, make sure you are in an orthographic view. One of the essential steps in manipulating objects is clearing out rotations. You can see the rotation value displayed in the Item tab. Inputting 0 in the X, Y, and Z fields clears these transformations. This command is also accessible through the shortcut Alt+R. Now I can demonstrate snapping. The way we snap the cube depends on the snap type selected. The default is increment, and the snap distance is determined by the zoom level, displayed at the top left of the screen. So at a zoom level of 1 meter, the cube will snap in increments of 1 meter. Zooming in or out changes that zoom level, so 10 centimeters into millimeters, or out to 100 meters in the default scene. The distance you can zoom out can be increased, but we can leave the defaults. So back at 1 meter, if we press G, X and move the cursor across, the cube snaps 1 meter in distance each snap. To move the cube in increments of 10 centimeters, we can first zoom into that zoom level. 10 centimeters is now displayed here. Now press G and the cube snaps in increments of 10 centimeters. The other snap types you'll find include vertex, edge, face, volume, edge center, and edge perpendicular. Each has a specific use case, and we'll see examples of the most common during the course. Let's set the snap type to vertex. We can switch snapping off by clicking the magnet icon. When snapping is off, we can activate it manually by pressing and holding the control key. So for example, if we press G to move the cube, we can activate snap by pressing and holding the control key. If you hover the cursor close to the sphere, you'll notice an orange circle appear. This indicates the cube can be snapped to this vertex. We can left click to confirm the operation. I generally leave the snap setting off and activate it using the control key, as I find this provides more control and better experience. We'll be using snapping quite regularly during the course, so you'll get more experience then. There is also a dedicated snapping lecture. Let's move on and click to enable proportional editing. The drop-down menu lists the fall-off types available for the tool. We can leave it at the default setting of smooth for this example. In the outliner, we can click the eye icon and hide the cube in the scene. Select this sphere and tab into edit mode. You'll notice how the settings from one mode don't carry to another, as here proportional editing is disabled, a key concept in Blender. Make sure vertex selection is enabled. Zoom in here and select the top vertex. Now press G, Z and move it up. Only the selected vertex moves while all other vertices remain in place, as you would expect. We can right click to cancel movement. We can press O and switch on proportional editing. If we press G now, you'll notice a circle appears on the screen. That represents the proportional editing area of influence. If we roll the mouse wheel forward, that influence decreases. If we roll the mouse wheel backwards, the influence increases. The more we increase the influence, the more the vertices around the selected vertex gets affected. This tool excels in sculpting organic shapes, offering the ability to quickly create complex forms with ease. We can right-click to cancel movement. Also, switch off proportional editing. Let's tab back to object mode. We also need to switch this off here. The next menu controls object type visibility and selection. These icons, such as the eye for hiding and arrow for making objects unselectable, provide quick access to streamline your workflow. Moving across, the next menu shows or disables the gizmos in the scene. Clears the screen of clutter if you don't use these tools. I find the rotation gizmo great for getting my bearings and axes directions. From the drop-down menu, you can enable or disable individual gizmos. The overlay menu offers control over scene visibility, including the grid, screen text, relationship lines, or the 3D cursor. This can be especially useful if you need to render a quick play blast, as it will hide everything in the rendered image. One more overlay menu that appears here is the Mesh Edit Mode overlay. But first we need to tab into Edit Mode. This overlay menu offers additional mesh data information like edge length or face normal direction. We can tab back to object mode. Next we come to shading types, an integral part of 3D visualization. The first option is to show or unhide X-ray mode with the provided button. If I rotate around the object, you'll see this effect more clearly. The X-ray mode lets you see through objects, providing insight into the inner structure. Within the shading drop-down, you'll find a control for the X-ray alpha amount, allowing for precise adjustments to this view. Feel free to switch it off to return to the standard view. The next shading type is wireframe mode, drawing only a wire on the edge of faces. It offers a skeletal view of your object, great for understanding the fundamental geometry. Following that we have solid shading, the default shading type in Blender, providing a tangible feel to the objects. Look Dev is another option, giving a material preview in the viewport. It simulates how materials and lighting interact, offering a more realistic view of your scene. The final type is render mode, showing how the scene will look once rendered. It's like a preview of the final product. Accessing these shading types is made easier with a pie menu. Simply press Z to open it and then press the corresponding number or click the shading type you want. In the drop-down menu, you'll find additional viewport shading options. Clicking on a sphere allows you to choose from one of the Studio Light presets. You can check on the cavity option to highlight the edge of the mesh. This brings out the finer details on the surface of the object, like small scratches, bumps, or details in a sculpt, or turn on shadows to help preview the shadows being cast. These different shading types can be useful depending on your Blender task at hand. Whether sculpting or modeling, these settings can significantly improve visual feedback and improve your workflow efficiency. That was a brief look at where you can find some of the more commonly used tools within the 3D view. In this video, we look at the tool shelf. Let's get started. From the View menu, we saw how to open and close the tool shelf. The shortcut is the T key. The tool shelf is essential as it hosts context-sensitive tools for transforming or editing objects. We'll first look at the tool shelf in object mode, then later in edit mode. The first tool is the Select tool. Press and hold the left mouse button and the list of selection types gets displayed. The default is Tweak. With this selection, simply click on an object to select it, then drag to reposition it. Now let's open this again and choose Select Box. With this selection method, a single click selects objects and a left click and drag will create a selection box, permitting you to choose multiple objects. Many find this highly convenient. It's the selection type I generally utilize. The next selection type is Circle Select. We'll demonstrate this, but first, make sure you have an object selected. Press Tab to enter edit mode. One thing to note is that the selection tool stays consistent, remaining the previous one used in this mode, echoing what was mentioned earlier regarding tool states not transferring between modes. On the selection menu, switch to Circle Select. Then left-click to select faces, edges, or vertices, depending on the mesh selection type. Circle Select, although somewhat limited, I find operates best when triggered from another selection type. So for example, let's come back and set the selection type to Select Box. To activate Circle Select, press C. Left-click to select parts of the mesh. To deselect, press the middle mouse button. To exit Circle Select, right-click. Really useful selection method for certain situations and when activated from another selection type. Finally, we have the Lasso Select tool. With Lasso Select set as the tool, we can left-click and drag a lasso selection to select parts of or all of the mesh. Similar to Circle Select, Lasso Select works best when activated from another selection type. Let's switch the selection type back to Select Box. To activate Lasso Select, press and hold the Control key and press and hold the right mouse button. Then draw a lasso selection around the object. I generally leave the type set to Select Box and only call the other selection types when needed. You can toggle through the selection types by pressing W. The icon switches to each, so if you remember the icon, it helps to select the one you want. Pressing Shift plus Spacebar opens the toolbar menu, whether you're in object or edit mode. From here you can switch by clicking on the selection method and choosing the type from here. One important thing to note when selecting vertices, edges or faces when in solid shading, only the visible vertices get selected. So if we deselect first, switch to Select Box also, then if we drag these visible vertices here, rotate around and any vertices that weren't visible will not get selected. This is important to be aware of. In wireframe mode, however, all vertices under the selection get selected. Let's tab back to object mode. Set the selection tool to your new favorite. Next up is the 3D cursor tool. With this tool active, left click to position the 3D cursor within the scene. A shortcut also exists to place the 3D cursor. First, switch back to the Select tool, press and hold Shift and right click. Accurate placement can be achieved via the View tab's Location and Rotation fields. If we input 10 in the XYZ, the cursor will be placed at that location. We will be taking an in-depth look at the 3D cursor in a later lecture, and you'll be surprised how versatile it really is. Below, we find the Move tool. The Move manipulator lets you grab and move objects in the scene. Arrows correspond to the axes: green for Y, red for X, blue for Z. Left-click the center circle to move an object without constraint. Next is the Rotation manipulator. Similar to the Move manipulator, the Rotation manipulator allows for rotation via grabbing any of the 3 circles. Left-click a circle to rotate around that axis, or click the center for free rotation. The Scale tool functions in a similar manner, allowing scaling along any of the axes or all simultaneously. The next option enables all 3 manipulators at once, though shortcuts like G for Move or for Rotate, S for Scale, and specifying an axis with X, Y or Z can be more convenient. For example, to move the sphere 1 meter along the X-axis, press G to move, X for the axes, 1 for distance, and Enter to confirm. While these tools prove valuable, especially for beginners, you may find yourself favouring shortcut keys as you become more familiar with Blender. In this video, we look at how to use the Annotate Measure and the Interactive Cube tool. Let's get started. We can move on to the Annotate tool. That gives you the ability to draw freely on the screen. By holding the left mouse button on the tool, you can switch between line, polygon, or an eraser tool. The related options for these tools appear at the top of the header in the 3D view. Click and draw somewhere on screen. This gets added as a layer, so from the drop-down, control the color, visibility, name, thickness, and opacity. Changing the color specifically applies to the current scribble you've made. You can find these properties also available in the View tab on the sidebar. If you expand the Annotation tab, these options will be revealed. Here you can double click on the name Note and we can rename this scribble. There's a special option called onion skinning that helps you animate what you draw using the timeline. You can use the before and after settings from the drop down to observe these changes. Right at the top you'll find the placement settings, which control the positioning of your annotation. By default, it's set to the 3D cursor, aligning your drawing with the plane of the 3D cursor. If you rotate your view, the alignment with the 3D cursor will become evident. Pressing Shift and right-clicking to reposition the cursor will allow you to draw another annotation aligned to the new cursor position. Other alignment options include View and Surface. While the View option aligns drawings to your current perspective, Surface enables you to draw directly on object surfaces. If you wish to remove an annotate layer, simply click the minus sign. Next in line is the Measure tool, a valuable asset for swiftly determining distances between 2 points or getting the angle. Let's get a closer look, so from the Add menu, let's add a new cube. By pressing Ctrl, you can activate Snap and highlight the corner vertex with a left click. Continue holding Ctrl and move the cursor across. You might notice this can also snap to the midpoint, but let's snap to the opposite vertex to display the distance, which in this case is 2 meters. You can repurpose this measurement by hovering over the endpoint until a particular icon emerges. Select that point and snap it across the diagonal to record that distance. This tool also exhibits angles. Left select, hold the distance away from the edge, and a fresh point is made. Press Ctrl and snap to a corner or midpoint vertex, and the angle measurement will be displayed. If you wish to remove this angle, select the point, and an X will highlight. Pressing X deletes it, reverting to the original distance measurement. If you wish to remove the dimension altogether, press X again to delete. Lastly, we can explore the Interactive Creation tool, which allows you to draw shapes in the scene or on top of other objects. Left click and drag to shape the rectangle. Release and drag again to set the height. You can create these on another cube by pressing Ctrl to activate snap and snapping to a vertex. If you want to draw a square, left click, drag and press Shift to maintain the aspect ratio. Pressing and releasing Shift once more forms a perfect cube. The Properties box then enables adjustments to size, location and rotation. If you left click and hold, other geometric primitives become accessible in the list. This tool is particularly useful for quickly blocking in objects of varying sizes, providing flexibility in your design process. In this video, we look at how to use the Extrude, Bevel and Edge Loop tool. Let's get started. Next, we can take a look at the tool shelf in edit mode. First, switch back to the Select Box tool. Ensure that a mesh object is selected, then press Tab and enter edit mode. Or alternatively, use the mode menu at the top of the screen to switch into edit mode from there. You can bypass all the tools we explored in object mode and come straight to the Extrude tool. Left clicking on this tool will unveil all the extrude tools available to you. With the tool set to extrude region, navigate to the top of the screen to change the selection method to face. Select the face on the cube now. The extrude manipulator allows you to grab the plus icon, drag it out and create a new section of mesh. Remember, the shortcut key for extrude is E. The other extrude options include extrude manifold, which creates manifold faces during extrusion, a brilliant addition as it adds geometry where needed to keep quads on the mesh. Other extrude tools are extrude along normals, extrude individual, and extrude to cursor. If we select extrude to cursor tool, you can click within the scene, creating an extrusion at the cursor's location. This command can be accessed quickly as a shortcut. We can first switch the tool back to select. Now if we press Ctrl and right click, you achieve the same outcome without needing to activate the specific extrude to cursor tool. Next we have the inset tool. First, let's tab back to object mode. Press A to select everything, then press X and delete all objects. To add another cube, press Shift plus S and reset the cursor to world origin, ensuring that the newly added cube is positioned at the world origin. Remember, objects added from the Add menu are placed at the 3D cursor's location. From the Add menu, we can add a cube. Now tab into edit mode. Ensure the selection type is set to face at the top. Select the face on the cube. Click the circle gizmo and drag towards the face to create an inset. Options for the inset then become available, allowing you to modify values and adjust the inset. The shortcut for this tool is the I key, and it's also found in the face menu here. Let's move on to the Bevel tool. Begin by selecting a face on the cube's side. Bevel all 4 edges by dragging them outward. If you switch to Edge Select, you can bevel individual edges. Switch to Vertex Select and choose a corner vertex. We need to change the effect type to vertices from the drop-down. Now click and drag to bevel the vertex. The shortcut is Ctrl plus Shift plus B. The command can be found in the vertex menu here. The shortcut for beveling edges and faces is Ctrl plus B. Now let's tab back to object mode. Press X and delete the cube. From the Add menu, add a second and we can tab back into edit mode. Lastly, we'll explore the Loop Cut tool. This tool places an edge loop on the mesh. Hovering the mouse close to an edge gives a preview of its position. Left click and hold to edge slide and find a desired position, then release to confirm. You can also leave the edge loop exactly at the insertion point by simply left clicking and releasing. The second tool in this menu is the Offset Edge Loop Cut. With the last edge you added still selected, left click and drag to form 2 new edges on each side. The shortcut for the Loop Cut command is Ctrl plus R. Left click to place the loop cut, drag to position it, and left click again to confirm. If you wish to leave a loop cut exactly where it's added, which is centrally between 2 edges, use Ctrl plus R. Left click, then right click. This way no edge sliding occurs and you can ensure it's centered. The shortcut for the offset edge loop cut is Ctrl plus Shift plus R. Simply drag down and left click to confirm. In this video we look at the knife and polybuild tools. Let's get started. We can now move on to the knife tool. This tool allows you to manually cut new edges into the mesh. First, tap back to object mode and press X to delete. Press Shift plus S to open the snap menu and ensure the cursor is back at the world origin. From the add menu in the mesh section, choose a cube. Tab back into edit mode now. To initiate a cut, left click on an edge, which adds the first point of the cut. The edge that you are adding is now displayed, and on the bottom info bar, different options for the tool such as midpoint and angle become accessible. Hovering on the corner vertex or on an edge will cause the box to highlight, indicating where the next point will snap. Click on the edge, then hover on a corner vertex and click there. To complete the cut, press enter. Note that this method doesn't cut all the way through the mesh. To achieve a complete cut through the mesh, the cut through command can be used. For this, align the cut to the view by coming into a top view. Click an edge here for the first point. Notice that on the info bar below, the cut through setting is currently off. Press C to toggle it on. To straighten the cut, press A for the angle constraint. With the edge now straight, click to add the second point. Press enter to confirm. Rotating around the object, you'll notice the edge has been added all the way around the entire mesh. Clicking and holding on the knife tool reveals a second tool called the bisect tool. To demonstrate this, add a new cube by first tabbing back to object mode, press X to delete the current cube, and since the cursor is at the world origin, press Shift plus A and from mesh, add a new cube. Tab back into edit mode. Press numpad 1 to return to a front orthographic view. This bisect tool has the power to cut right through an object, but you must have the object selected. Press A to select everything. To initiate the cut, click away from the selected object. Drag down and left click. You can fine tune the cut using the manipulator, and the options let you adjust both the position and shape of the cut. The clear inner and outer options give you control to remove one side of the cut. Clicking away on the screen finalizes the cut. Next, we can explore the polybuild tool, an invaluable asset for retopology, the process of creating a low poly version of your model. First, tab back to object mode and delete the cube. From the add menu, select the plane this time. Press G, Z and drag it upwards. Tab back into edit mode to use the polybuild tool. Hover on an edge to highlight it, then left click and drag to create a new edge. Pressing Ctrl will create a triangle from an edge. To delete a face, press and hold Shift. Hover to highlight the face in red and then left click to remove that face. This tool is highly effective for retopology, often used in conjunction with a shrink wrap modifier and face snap enabled, greatly accelerating the process. In this video, we look at the spin tool. Let's get started. We can now explore the spin tool. First, tab back to object mode, then press X to delete. From the add menu in mesh, let's add a cylinder for this example. Now tab into edit mode. The spin tool can be used to create a sweep, so activate it. By pressing and holding the Alt key, you can select this entire edge loop of vertices. To properly view this, switch into a front view, where the curve indicates the direction. So up top, select the Y-axis for the sweep. Notice that the handle centers on the 3D cursor and pivots from this position. Clicking here will cause the new vertices to overlap, but you can adjust the position of the center afterwards from the options box. Alternatively, you can press Ctrl plus Z to undo those steps. You can use the 3D cursor location fields to position the cursor accurately. However, let's press Shift plus the right mouse button to place the cursor out here, optimizing the pivot for forming the curve. Click on the widget and rotate these vertices. In the angle field, input 90. The position can then be adjusted if necessary. Here's a second example using the tool to sweep a profile. Select everything by pressing A, then press M for the merge menu and choose at center. This merges all the selected vertices into one at their center. Press G and look closely to find the single vertex. Let's place this vertex at the center by pressing Shift plus S and choosing cursor to world origin. Then press Shift plus S and select selection to cursor to snap the vertex to the 3D cursor. Switch the tool back to the select box. To start the extrusion, press E and X to create a base. Press Ctrl plus right click and begin forming a profile. Repeat the extrusion around this area. It doesn't need to be highly accurate, just ensure the profile stays to one side of the center line. I can quickly finish the profile here. Now press A to select it all. We can change back to the spin tool. Also, make sure the axis is set to Z up top. As we've seen, the spin tool uses the 3D cursor as the pivot, so ensure the cursor remains centered. Grab the manipulator and drag to create the sweep. The options allow you to increase the angle to 360 and finish the sweep. Make adjustments to the center X and increase or decrease the diameter. Similar to the profile you might create on a lathe, this tool could create some really nice shapes very quickly. Next, let's move on to the Smooth Vertices tool. This tool functions by averaging the angles of the selected vertices. Select everything with A, then click and drag the tool to smooth the shape. The properties then allow you to modify those changes. Following that, we have the Edge Slide tool. Press and hold Alt to select an edge loop around the shape. We can then edge slide the selected edge to reposition. Double tapping G is the shortcut. Edge slide retains the original mesh shape, allowing it to slide along the surface. The Shrink Flatten tool is next, allowing you to increase or decrease the selected edge's size using the tip. Alt plus S is the shortcut for this command. The next tool is Shear. The Shear tool lets you shear the selected vertices or face along a chosen axis by dragging. Lastly, the Rip Region tool. Click and drag the widget to rip the selected edge loop apart. The shortcut for this command is the V key. In this video, we look at workspaces. Let's get started. Begin by tabbing back so that we can delete this object. You'll notice the tabs running across the top of the viewport. These are custom workspace layouts. Each workspace is a thoughtful collection of editors set up specifically for common tasks such as modeling, shading, and scripting. If you recall, we previously explored these editor types from the menu. Each editor serves a specific purpose, but when arranged together, they provide the necessary tools for specialized tasks. This is the innovation that Workspaces brings, opening up a new way of working. Consider the UV editor, for example. It has the 3D view on the right side and the UV editor on the left. This workspace also includes the outline editor on the top right, with the properties editor beneath it. Though this is the default layout, customization is an option if needed. Now let's delve into creating and setting up our own workspace. Creating workspaces can be done in a couple of ways. First, click the New Tab button here, then choose the type. Generally, you can commence with one of the presets. An alternative way to create a workspace is to right-click an existing one and choose Duplicate. This creates a new workspace alongside the existing one. Double-click to rename it. For instance, My Workspace. This action duplicates the existing workspace exactly. Next, let's simplify this workspace to just one editor and then build it back up. Press T and N to close both shelves. if we come to the dividing line between the 3D view and the properties editor, we can right click to get this menu. The first option is vertical split. This will add another editor. Drag the line to position and add one beside the existing. Right clicking gives you the option to join these with an arrow indicating which editor you wish to remove and return this to one. Right click again, this time selecting horizontal. Then position the line and choose whether you want this added above or below. Then right click to join these areas back. If you right click on an edge again, the option Swap Areas reverses the order of the outline and properties editor. Right click and join these editors. We can repeat the process for the timeline and 3D view and join these together also. Combine the 3D view and the properties editor into one. That leaves us with just the 3D view. To split this view, come to the upper corner on either side and a plus icon will appear. Left click and drag to the left to split this into two. To split the left side editor vertically, hover in the top corner and left click and drag down to split. You can join them using the same method. Hover to get the plus icon, then drag up or down quickly to choose the direction you want to join. If you start creating extra editors, right click to cancel. It might take some practice, but remember you can always right click and join from here. In the editor type drop-down, you can choose an editor type. Change the second editor also to demonstrate how effortlessly you can create workspaces in Blender. Additionally, you can modify and customize existing workspaces. Right-click for further options such as deleting the layout, reordering the workspaces to front or back. Also, you can remove the menus and provide more space for the workspace menu bar. Put a checkmark back in the box to show the menus again. Lastly, before we conclude, change the editor type back to 3D view. The functionality of having a double viewport provides an extremely valuable feature in Blender. In this video, we look at what collections are in Blender. Let's get started. Let's begin by coming back to the Layout tab and over to the Outliner. This is where you'll find collections, a powerful tool in organizing the objects within your scene. Collections provide you control over visibility during render, enable you to light specific objects, and make appending from other scenes both quick and effortless. The scene collection acts as the parent collection, housing all others beneath it. The first collection, aptly named collection, is listed here. Its checkbox ensures that everything inside is included in the view layer, or what's visible in the scene. The eye icon controls visibility, offering a convenient way to hide or unhide objects, while the camera icon governs whether objects are included or excluded from the render. There are additional settings in the filter menu. The next makes objects or collections selectable or unselectable in the viewport. The next option is Disable in Viewport, which turns off or disables the visibility of objects and collections in the viewport. The final two options can be ignored. The first is used for masking objects during render, and the second, Indirect Only, sets collections to contribute solely to indirect light. Close the filter menu and you'll see the icons we've enabled are now available. Double-click the collection and rename it Geo, short for geometry. To create a new collection, right-click and select Create a New Collection. If the Geo collection was previously selected, the new collection will be added inside. Double-click this new collection and rename it Lights. If you want to add the new collection under the Scene collection, first select the parent Scene collection. Right-click and create another. This will appear under the Scene collection and you can double-click and rename it Cameras. Reordering collections is a breeze no matter where they're placed. Simply select the Lights collection and drag and drop it over the Scene collection to move it. When adding objects to the scene, depending on the selected collection, the object will get placed inside. Select the Geo collection. Then from the Add menu, add a cube. The Extrude from View Layer checkbox lets you control what will be rendered in the current view layer up top here. The next icon will control whether the cube can be selected or not. When off, the cube can't be selected. Really useful when you don't want to accidentally move objects. The eye icon hides objects. The shortcut for hiding is H, and for unhiding Alt plus H. Another icon disables objects in the viewport. The camera icon will exclude the object in render. Let's come to the Add menu and from here add a camera. Press G and move this away from the cube. Let's come back to the Add menu and from the Light menu add a sun lamp to the scene. Drag this away from the cube also. To move the light into the light collection, press M and choose the light collection to place it inside. If we select the camera, in the outliner, click and drag to drop it into the camera collection. Collections can be closed or expanded using the numpad minus and plus keys. Repeatedly pressing numpad plus expands the hierarchy, while the numpad minus key closes it back one level at a time. The icons signify the objects inside collections. A triangle, for instance, denotes a mesh object, and the 2 indicates there are 2 mesh objects inside this collection. In this video, we look at the very versatile, essential, multi-purpose 3D cursor. Let's get started. To get started, press A to select everything in the scene, press X and delete. We previously looked at the 3D cursor tool on the tool shelf. When activated, you can click to position the 3D cursor within the 3D view or even on the face of objects. In the sidebar, in the View tab, the location transforms of the 3D cursor are displayed, providing the exact coordinates of the cursor as you move it. Next, we can look at accurately positioning the 3D cursor. Blender operates on the right-angled Cartesian system where the z-axis points upwards, the x-axis runs horizontally, and the y-axis extends from front to back. These 3 axes work in conjunction to describe every point in 3-dimensional space. The 3D cursor's location, along with the positions of every vertex, edge, and face, can be precisely calculated using these points. This information is visible in the View tab, allowing for accurate positioning of the 3D cursor. Visual aids include the red line representing the x-axis, the green line for the y-axis, and the blue line for the z-axis, which can be activated via the Overlays menu. The intersection of these lines at the world's center 0, 0, 0 represents the convergence of all axes. You can reset the 3D cursor to world origin by updating the location fields to 0, 0, 0. We can also align objects to the 3D cursor's rotation. The rotation field below controls the rotation of the 3D cursor. Here we can input a value of 45 in the X rotation field to rotate the cursor. Then input 0 for the Y and Z. This is useful when aligning objects. So from the Add menu, we can add another cube. In the Options box, change the Align setting to be 3D cursor. If you wanted this behavior as default, that setting is available in Preferences. So press F4 and open Preferences. In the Editing tab, this setting New Objects Align to. The default is World, but you can change this to 3D cursor and have objects align to the 3D cursor by default when added to the scene. However, since aligning objects to the 3D cursor is a rare task, it may be left as is. We can, however, use another command in the scene, so I can leave this at World and X down Preferences. If you wanted to align existing objects to the 3D cursor, come to the Object menu. In the Transform menu, come down and choose Align to Transform Orientation. Then from the Options box, you can change this to Cursor here and match the rotation of the 3D cursor this way. The 3D cursor also comes with a dedicated Snap menu. By right-clicking and selecting Snap, you have 6 options for cursor positioning. For instance, Cursor to World Origin resets the cursor and clears rotation values. You can also access this menu via the Object menu, or use Shift+S as a shortcut. Next, let's look at snapping individual vertices to the 3D cursor. Let's select a cube and from the Mode menu, enter Edit Mode. Switch to Vertex Selection. Position the 3D cursor somewhere in the scene. Now select a vertex on the cube. Press Shift+S and from here we can choose Selection to 3D Cursor. That will snap the selection to the 3D cursor. Press A and select it all. Press Shift+S again and this time choose Selection to Cursor Keep Offset. This will snap your selection to its position but maintain the vertices position relative to one another. You can also align objects to the location of the 3D cursor. First, we can switch back to Object Mode, position the cursor in the scene, then come to Object and Transform and down to Align Objects. In the options, set relative to the 3D cursor, then set the axes. All three can be activated using the Shift key. From Align Mode, change to one of these options. Next is snapping to the position of the 3D cursor. Press Shift+S and choose Cursor to World Origin. We can call up the same snap menu and we can choose Selection to Cursor. That snaps the origin of the cube to the 3D cursor. The yellow dot is the origin of the cube. It's possible to change that origin with the help of the 3D cursor. From the Mode menu, we can switch to Edit Mode. Currently, the origin is at World 0, and one thing to note, if we move all the mesh in Edit Mode, notice how the origin point remains in place. I can right-click to cancel move. That's one major difference when moving objects in Edit or Object Mode. In Object Mode, the origin moves along. We can set the origin at the base of the cube, and it's usually where you will want it. Up top, change the mesh selection type to Face, then select the bottom face. Press Shift+S and put cursor to Selected. To set the origin, we need to switch back to Object Mode. Then from the Object menu in Set Origin, we can choose Origin to 3D Cursor. The dot or origin of the cube updates to that face. Another use is using the 3D cursor as a rotation point. The pivot point in Blender can be set to the 3D cursor, and this allows rotation around its position. In the location field, we can input 0 for the X, Y, and Z and place the cursor back to 0. Let's use the gizmo here and come into a front view. If we press R and rotate the cube, it rotates around its own origin point. We can change that here in the pivot menu to the 3D cursor. Now back here, press R to rotate. This time it's rotating around the 3D cursor. We can right click to cancel rotation, then reposition the cursor. Now press R and rotate again. This can be a great way to rotate objects quickly. The final aspect of the 3D cursor is using it as an insertion point. Let's change the pivot point back to medium from the menu. If we come to the Add menu, in Mesh, add a sphere. Objects get added by default to the position of the 3D cursor. This works the same way in Edit Mode. The 3D cursor is a very versatile multi-purpose tool, essential when working in Blender. In this video, we'll look at snapping. Let's get started. To begin, we can press A and select everything. Press X and delete. Put the cursor back to World Origin, so press Shift+S and place that back here. In the outliner, select the Geo collection. Then back in the scene, press Shift+A and from Mesh, add a cube. Now we can open the Scene tab. In here, expand the units area. By default, Blender's scene unit is metric with a unit value of 1. The length setting is meters and we can leave it this way for the following examples. Let's open the Item tab. Here, because the length setting is meters, the dimensions are displayed as such. These dimensions are equal to 2 meters along the X, Y, and Z axes. In the scene, let's come into a front view and then an orthographic view. Snapping is a method to accurately position or align objects or parts of objects. The magnet icon you see will turn snapping on or off. For this example, we can switch it on. How we snap the cube is dictated by the snap type found in the list here. The default setting is increment. This increment snaps to the grid relative to the cube's position and the current zoom level. Additionally, there is an absolute setting that lets you snap the object's origin to the grid points relative to the world origin. When in an orthographic view, the snapping increment amount changes based on your zoom level. You can open the snap menu with Shift plus Control plus Tab, set the snap to increment, then zoom in or out and set the zoom level to meters. When the zoom level is at 1 meter, the cube will snap in increments of 1 meter. You can activate this by pressing G and then X, moving the cursor. Each increment the cube snaps to equals 1 meter, and you can see that distance displayed on the top left of the screen. Right-click to cancel move. If you wanted to snap in smaller increments, like 10 centimeters, zoom into a level of 10 centimeters. Then press G. The cube will now snap in increments of 10 centimeters. This same method applies to millimeters. Just zoom into a level of millimeters. Press G and the cube will snap in increments of 1 millimeter. Right-click to cancel the move. The same is true if you zoomed out to kilometers. Now let's compare relative and absolute snapping. Currently, when we snap the cube, it's snapping relative to its existing position. To see this more clearly, turn off snap with the shortcut Shift plus Tab. Press G and move the cube away from the world origin. You may want to press Z and switch to wireframe for a better view. If you zoom in, you'll notice the cube's origin isn't precisely on a grid point. Turning snap back on with Shift plus Tab, you'll see when you press G and move the cube, it moves relative to its position. Right-click to cancel the move. Absolute grid snap is a different method, snapping an object relative to grid points. Open the snap menu and switch on the absolute setting. Press G and the cube's origin will snap instantly to the nearest grid point. It will then snap relative to grid points as you continue to move it. Grid snapping can be a great way to achieve accuracy. Up top, switch off snap. Then in the snap menu, switch off absolute. Also, change the snap element setting to vertex. Back in the scene, let's zoom out here first. Duplicate the cube by pressing Shift plus D, then press X to move it along the X-axis and position it as required. Press Z to switch back to solid shading. To move the cube, press G. Then to activate snap, when off, press Control. This allows you control when snap is enabled and the way I like to use it. Hover on a corner vertex and an orange square will indicate the closest vertex the cube can snap onto. Then click to confirm. This is limited by the fact it must be the closest vertex. Let's open the snap menu briefly. Here you will see the default snap width setting is closest, which snaps the closest vertex of the cube to the target. So in this case, the corner vertex closest was snapped. You can expand snapping further by setting a base point. Similar to CAD programs, if we press G to move the cube, down below here you'll see a setting called Set Base Point, and that's the shortcut B. So if we press B, we next need to select the base point as the command is open. So if I, for example, pick this back corner, that's now the base point and snap is now active. So we just need to decide where we want to place the cube and click. So really precise way of snapping objects in Blender without needing to change any other settings. This also works with increment. So if we have increment set and we press G, then press B to choose a base point, then snap in the same way. However, it's also possible to navigate during transform. Press and hold the Alt key. This will allow you navigate while in snap mode. Also, when set to increment, press G, then B for a base point. You also get the option to pick a midpoint. So select this as the base point. Then again, when snapping, pick a midpoint. So that's a really big change in Blender and huge improvement to snapping. Let's open the snap menu and switch this back to vertex. The other snap width setting are the center or median. These are similar and will snap the center of the object to the vertex. So in this case, the origin of the cube as this is center. If the second object has a center edge, you could snap the cube to that vertex or edge. The last setting is active, and this will do the same thing as center in object mode and snap to the center of the cube. However, in edit mode, this works similar to setting a base point. But in this case, we set an active vertex where you can achieve precise snapping. For this, we can tab into edit mode, press A to select all the vertices, then deselect and reselect this corner vertex. This highlights white to indicate the last vertex selected and therefore the active object. The active object in Blender is a way to manage the order of objects, and we'll talk more about it during the course. So if we press G and press Ctrl to activate snap, we can snap the cube based on the active vertex. So now when I snap, the cube snaps based on the active vertex. A really great way to accurately snap in edit mode. Selecting the base point also works in edit mode, so you have good options for precise snapping in both modes. Let's open the snap menu again. The backface culling setting excludes backface geometry, and I never have a need to enable. Align rotation to target is useful, so let's enable this. Set the snap type to face and the snap width setting to closest. Back in the scene, select a corner vertex. Now press Ctrl plus Shift plus B for the bevel vertex command and bevel the vertex. Drag to increase its size and left click to confirm. Tab back to object mode now. If we select this cube, the align rotation to target will allow us align the cube to the beveled face. Press G, then get the cube into alignment, then left click and the cube gets aligned to the face of the bevel. We can come back to the snap menu and switch off align to rotation of target. We can also change the snap type back to vertex. In the Scene Properties tab, let's change the length setting to millimeter. Then make sure and save your file. In this video, we look at face normals. Let's get started. To begin, we can press A and select everything, then press X to delete the selection. From the Add menu in Mesh, we can add a new cube, then tab into Edit mode. In 3D applications, face direction is really important. In order to render objects and scenes, these programs consume considerable computational resources. By calculating the visible and front-facing faces of the cube here, they conserve resources by avoiding the rendering of back faces. Face normals are the means to determine the face orientation and direction. Front faces in particular influence the interaction with light and shadows and are what the camera sees. Although Blender can automatically ascertain the correct face direction, you may occasionally need to manually update it. Thankfully, Blender offers a couple of tools to assist with this task. The first of these tools can be found in the Overlays menu. Come down and enable Face Orientation. Right away the faces of the cube turn blue. These blue faces indicate the mesh's front faces. Right-clicking here allows you to add this overlay to your Favorites menu, providing a crucial and frequently needed check. Every face on the cube has both a front and back face. The front faces are rendered and shown in blue. Let's switch to Face Select up top, then select the cube's top face. Press X and choose Faces. Now we can see the internal faces are red. These red faces denote the back faces of the mesh, which aligns with what is expected of internal faces. Suppose this cube were to represent an interior space, like a room. In that case, reversing these faces would be essential. Select an internal face and we can come to the Mesh menu and down here in Normals. Here you will find three options. The first manually flips the selected face or faces. The second option recalculates outside faces, reversing them if deemed outside faces. The third option recalculates inside, flipping them if identified as inside faces. Choose the first option to flip the face and change the face normal's direction. This will simply flip the direction of the face normals. Flipping faces will be a regular process because if you notice shading issues on your mesh, the first check should be the face orientation. The second should also be face orientation because you didn't check correctly the first time. The final check should also be face orientation. If textures look odd, check face orientation. And always, before you export your model, check face orientation. Blender provides a second tool to visually represent normal direction. This is located in the Mesh Edit tools here. This menu is available in edit mode. At the bottom we have the display normals for vertices, edges and faces. We can check on face to enable it. Increase the size it's displayed on screen by increasing this value here. The line symbolizes the face normal direction, pointing outwards on these faces, except the face we reversed. If we select another face, press Shift plus Control plus N for the Recalculate Inside shortcut. That determines that is an internal face and the face normals are now flipped. Let's come back to the Overlays menu and switch this off. Another feature to highlight is backface culling, found in the Shading Settings menu. Enabling this renders the back faces of the mesh invisible, allowing only the front faces to be seen. This reflects what will and won't render, assisting when modeling. Importing a mesh with reversed faces into a game engine or rendering it in Blender may result in invisibility or distorted textures. Therefore, understanding the tools to check face normals in Blender is vital. We can switch off back face culling. We can also press Q and switch off the face orientation overlay. One crucial point to consider is that the Quick Favorites menu stores different shortcuts for each mode. For example, the face orientation command won't be available in object mode after tabbing back. Press Q here. The face orientation command is not available. Each mode requires its addition to the Quick Favorites menu. We can come up to the Overlays menu and add this to the Quick Favorites menu for object mode, enabling activation or deactivation from either mode. Most commands you never use in more than one mode, but face orientation is one of the exceptions. In this video, we look at the coordinate system. Let's get started. Blender uses the right-angled Cartesian system, a geometrical framework used for describing the position of every point in three-dimensional space. This is where the z-axis is pointing upwards, defining the vertical orientation. The x-axis runs horizontally from left to right and the y-axis front to back, with each axis having both a positive and negative direction, enabling a complete spatial description. We mostly take it for granted, but at any time the position of any vertex, edge or face can be calculated using the coordinate system. Why is this important? The location for every vertex, edge or face can be found, allowing for detailed 3D modeling. Lighting calculations use vector math like dot product and Lambert's law that rely on the Cartesian system to calculate accurate shadows, highlighting and intensity. Object transformations are also simplified using this system. The list goes on. We saw previously the 3D cursor can also be accurately positioned within the coordinate system by using the XYZ location transform fields. We can press X and delete the cube. Press Shift plus S and put the cursor to world origin. Then from the Add menu, in Mesh, add a cube. We can tab in here. In edit mode here, we can select the corner vertex of the mesh. If we come to the mesh menu and down to separate, here we can separate selection. Now tab back to object mode and select the vertex. It will be called cube.001 and you can make sure it's selected in the outliner. Click the eye icon and hide the first cube. This isolated vertex is the foundational element in computer graphics that defines the shape of a polygon mesh. Using this vertex, you can extrude and form the other two vital components, edges and faces. These three elements are the building blocks of all mesh objects. If you open the Item tab, you'll notice that it retains the cube's origin coordinates, 0, 0, 0 in the X, Y, Z axes. By going to the Object menu and setting the origin to geometry, with geometry referring to the single vertex and its 3D space position, you'll see updates to -1 in the X, -1 in the Y and 1 in the Z. If we press numpad 1 and come into a front view, we can visually see the position along the negative x-axis is -1 and +1 in the z-axis. Let's tab into edit mode. Select the vertex, press E, X, input 2 and enter. Now we have created a second vertex connected by the second component, an edge. Switch to edge selection at the top and select the newly formed edge. Press E, Z, input -2 and enter. This action creates a second edge below, introducing the third component, a face. We can switch to face selection up top and select the new face. You'll notice the polygon has 4 vertices, one at each corner. If we switch to edge selection, you'll see how each edge connects the corner vertices, and in face selection, how all these combine to form a single face. Now press E, Y, input 2 and enter. This extrusion sequence transforms a single vertex into an edge and then a face, eventually creating a cube with 6 sides using the X, Y and Z axes within the coordinate system. Let's press Q and switch on the face orientation overlay. This is a common occurrence when extruding from edges or faces. Select it all and press Shift+N and recalculate outside. In this video, we set up an asset library and link it to our asset browser inside Blender. Let's get started. To begin, we can tab back to Object Mode. Press Q and switch off the Face Orientation overlay. Let's create a new workspace, specifically for the asset browser. Up top, right-click on the Layout tab and choose Duplicate. This creates a copy of our current workspace. Then double-click and rename this to Asset Browser for clarity. Now let's adjust our panels. Hover over the dividing line between the 3D view and the timeline editor until the cursor changes to a double arrow. Then drag up to expand the timeline editor, creating more room for our asset browser. Change the editor type by selecting the editor type drop-down, search for and select Asset Browser. The asset browser simplifies adding objects by linking or appending. Follow Preferences uses the settings defined in your Blender preferences, where the default mode is Append Reuse Data. This mode ensures that any assets brought in from your linked asset libraries will share the same object data. In the drop-down, there are options like Current File, which refers to assets you've marked in the project you're currently working on. Remember, objects must be marked as assets to appear here. We've seen previously how to link external blend files as libraries via the File Paths tab in Preferences. Once linked, they're accessible from this dropdown. The Essentials category contains predefined assets like hair, which are included in the Blender version you've installed. You can right-click on any asset to view its blend file or check its location if needed. This is particularly useful when you need to see the contents of an asset blend file, like the one provided with Blender for hair models. We can close down this blend file and come back to Blender. Now let's mark a simple cube as an asset. You can do this through the Object menu by navigating to Asset and selecting Mark as Asset. Alternatively, in the outliner, right-click on the cube and choose Mark as Asset from the Context menu. The cube will then be available in the asset browser when you switch to Current File. Blender automatically generates a thumbnail for it, but you can customize this. Select the cube, press N, and in the sidebar, that appears. You can add a custom thumbnail. Simply take a screenshot, save it, and then upload it here. This is also where you can add a name, description, and other metadata to your asset, ensuring everything is well organized and easily identifiable. To categorize our asset, click the plus sign next to Catalogs to create a new one. Double-click to rename it Mesh. Now, if you click back to Unassigned, you can drag and drop the cube into the Mesh catalog. This sorts it into the new category you've created, making it readily available for future projects. For our next step, I want to demonstrate using 2 blend files to set up an asset library. The first file is downloadable from my website. Open a web browser and navigate to blenderzen.com. On the asset page, scroll down and you will find the file available for download. Remember, this is a zipped file, so you need to save and then extract it before we can use it in Blender. Back in Blender, let's clear the current scene. Press A to select all objects, then X to delete them. Now let's bring in the assets we downloaded. Go to File, scroll down to Append, and navigate to the downloaded blend file. Double-click to open it and enter the object folder to see all the available objects. To import them, select all by pressing A, and then Append to import them into our scene. We will be saving this file as an asset library, so first we can save this. So come to File and Save As. This first step is important as the file will be saved in a permanent location. This will be here in my main folder called My Asset Library. Here I can create a new folder. There will be one library folder where all blend files containing ARC assets such as this file will be stored. Rename this library _1. You can name this whatever makes sense for you, but this is just an example. These names can be changed later anyway. We can also create a second folder and rename this one library _2. Let's double click inside here, library _1. In the name field, this can be renamed ARC Assets. Now save as to save this library. Let's press Z and switch to Material Preview to check the materials on our newly appended objects. Let's start with the kettle and create an asset. In the outliner, press the period key to jump to the kettle if it's not visible. Right-click on this and from here mark as asset. Done. Down below, the kettle should be ready to boil and you can narrow the search by switching this to current file. This is now ready to be dragged and dropped into the scene. If we drag select the remaining objects, press Shift+R to repeat the last command, these will all be marked as assets. Right now, these assets are listed as unassigned, so click the plus here and create a new catalog. Rename this Chairs. If we select on Assigned again, we can select this chair and drag and drop it over the Chairs catalog. That will place the chair inside. You can do the same for the remaining assets and add them to a catalog, but I'm just going to create one new catalog. Rename this Kitchen Assets. Then drag all these unassigned assets and drop them into my Kitchen Assets catalog. We are done creating the asset file now, so we can come to File and Save. Then we can come to File and New. Let's open a new blend file. The first thing we can do is press A to select everything, press X and delete. Let's come to Edit and open Preferences. Then we can open the File Paths tab. In the library asset area, we can link that asset file we just created. To add a path, we can click the plus. This will open up Blender's File Explorer window, so navigate to where you created the library folder. This will open the path to this library and make available any blend files inside. You can add more blend files to the library at any time. Now click Add Asset Library. In the name field, let's add ARC_assets after library so we can tell the folder and the contents. Let's click the plus and this time we can navigate back and select library _2. Now add this here. In the name field we can add cube diorama. We'll get a blend file for this library shortly. We can close preferences. Let's drag up the timeline and make some space for the asset browser. Then from the editor type drop down, let's switch this to an asset browser. We can change this from all to be the ARC asset file now available here. Now all the models we marked as assets are available here in the asset browser and each listed within their catalog. These can be simply dragged and dropped into the scene. There are 3 options when adding assets into the scene. Append Reuse Data is the default. This appends the asset from the library file and any copy uses the same data. This means if I add 2 kettles into the scene and tab into Edit 1, the other will also update as it's using the same object data. The append option will not link the object data, so adding another kettle and editing this will not affect any other instance of this object. The link option links directly from the original file. You can edit the original file and the changes will update on the current asset. Very useful in situations where multiple people are working on different assets for the one scene. Blender has an asset library file available, so let's look at adding this file to our ever-expanding library. I can drag in a web browser. Here at blender.org, we can click and open the download page. Here we can open the demo files page. Here the Acid Library demo scene is available. Let's download this cube diorama file and add this to our Acid library. This should start automatically, but if it fails to start, download manually and select an alternative mirror. This is a zip file, so it needs to be uncompressed first. I can open the download folder and unzip the file. This utility 7-zip works well on Windows. Next, this can be saved in our Acid library _2. So I can drag over a second File Explorer window and just use these to copy across. Open up the folder to the blend file first. Now drag this diorama blend file inside the library _2 folder. Also drag over the text file as this provides the Acid information for your library. The Acid library is now complete. With Blender's Acid browser, the sky's the limit. Your design possibilities just became endless. We can open back up Blender. In the library dropdown, we can switch to the second library and the assets will be available here. Change this back to append reuse data. These assets can then be dragged and dropped into the scene. There are many other sources of assets available online where you can start creating materials, HDRI and Acid model libraries. In this video, I want to highlight the most common issues students encounter using Blender and some solutions to help you deal with them successfully. If you want to follow along with this video, you'll find this file in the resource folder of the course. One pervasive issue when modeling in Blender is the presence of doubled up vertices. Such redundancies can cause a variety of problems, including shading, texturing, or rendering artifacts, and can also adversely affect vertex weight painting, among other things. Let's consider an example where you're trying to inset a face by initially choosing to extrude it. Press E for extrusion. If you change your mind and decide to use the inset tool instead, you might instinctively right-click to cancel. However, this action doesn't cancel the initial extrusion command. The extrusion has occurred, and to confirm, press G. You might find an additional face occupying the same space as your original selected face. One way to help ascertain the number of vertices you're working with, activate Statistics option in the Overlays menu. It will show you the count of vertices. If you select all, a standard cube, for instance, should display 8 vertices. Here, however, it shows 12, indicating the overlap. You won't always know the number of vertices, so it's always helpful to regularly press M and choose Merge by Distance. This action will remove vertices that occupy the same location, effectively eliminating any extra vertices. Yet another scenario where faces may overlap occurs when you attempt to divide a face in two. Switch to Vertex Selection and select 2 vertices. If you press F at this point thinking it will do the job, you're actually just creating an extra edge. To visually isolate this, select the adjacent face and press H to hide it. This reveals the extra edge. We can select the edge and press X to delete. To make the face visible again, press Alt plus H. To correctly split the face in two, switch to Vertex Selection mode. Select 2 vertices and then press J to join. This will divide the face approximately without adding extra unwanted geometry. The next common problem that arises in Blender is with loop cuts not functioning as expected. Loop cuts are a valuable tool for adding extra edges to your mesh, serving to increase detail or maybe exert greater control over the subdivision surface modifier. You may encounter instances where pressing Ctrl plus R to activate the loop cut tool does not yield the expected results. Specifically, you may find that only a single vertex appears as an option, which you can observe at the top of the edge. If I move my cursor down the mesh here, you'll see a preview of an edge, but the loop cut still won't fully connect from top to bottom or wrap around the mesh as intended. The culprit behind this behavior is often an n-gon in your mesh. To clarify, if you right-click momentarily to cancel, you'll notice that all the lower faces where the edge preview appeared are 4-sided polygons or quads. However, the face at the top of the mesh here has more than 4 edges, making it an n-gon. Loop cuts are programmed to avoid n-gons. They simply don't know how to handle them, so they refuse to create a cut through these problematic polygons. This serves as yet another reason to steer clear of using n-gons in your mesh. If you find it absolutely necessary to create an edge loop through an area with an n-gon, you do have an alternative method, the knife tool. Activate the knife tool by pressing the K key, then select your starting point at the top of the mesh. Navigate to the bottom of your mesh and click and establish the second point for the cut. Confirm the action by pressing Enter. This way you can add an edge loop to a mesh containing an n-gon, just not through the regular loop cut command. Occasionally while modeling, you may experience the sudden disappearance of your work after pressing the 1 key. This can be particularly confusing if you're accustomed to using the keys 1, 2 and 3 for selecting vertices, edges and faces. However, it's crucial to remember that these numeric keys function differently depending on your current mode in Blender. In edit mode, pressing 1, 2 or 3 allows you to select vertices, edges or faces, as you're probably familiar with. However, when you're in object mode, these same keys actually serve to toggle different collections on and off. For example, if you press 4, all collections except for the 4th one will be hidden from view. Similarly, pressing 5 will hide all collections other than the 5th one. If you find yourself in a situation where multiple collections have been hidden and you want to make them all visible again, there's a straightforward solution. Simply press and hold the Control key while clicking on the eye icon in the outliner. This action will unhide all your collections, restoring visibility to your viewport. On occasion, you might find yourself pressing the M key and merging all vertices to the center, leaving you with a lone vertex. While this may seem straightforward, it presents some challenges in Blender's interface. For instance, if you switch to edge selection mode, this solitary vertex becomes invisible. The reason for this is simple. In edge mode, you need a pair of connected vertices to form a visible edge. Similarly, in face selection mode, you'll also notice that nothing is displayed because a face requires at least 3 connected vertices. Attempting to extrude this single vertex while in edge or face mode won't yield the result you're aiming for. It will merely move the existing vertex. To properly extrude, you'll need to switch back to vertex selection mode. Once there, pressing the E key will allow you to extrude the vertex, thereby forming an edge. However, be cautious. When you're in face selection mode and you try to extrude by pressing E, doing so won't create a new face. It will only move the edge you've formed. If your goal is to create a face, you must either be in vertex or edge selection mode. For instance, while in edge selection mode, pressing E will extrude the edge, creating a new face in the process. Now, when you switch to face selection mode, you'll find that the new face can indeed be selected and extruded. When working with multiple objects in a Blender scene, the need to zoom in closely for detailed work can arise. For instance, zooming into the first monkey head object may present no difficulties. Similarly, zooming into the second monkey head could also be straightforward. However, when you attempt to zoom into the last one here, you might notice that your zooming capabilities are suddenly more restricted. The reason for this limited zoom range can be attributed to the view mode you're currently in, typically user perspective. One way to circumvent this restriction is to switch your view mode to orthographic. Unlike the perspective mode, orthographic view removes the limitation on how closely you can zoom into an object. To switch to orthographic view, use the relevant controls in your Blender interface. Once you're in this mode, you'll find that you can zoom in extremely close to your object without any hindrance. Alternatively, if you prefer to work in user perspective mode but still want a workaround for the restricted zoom, you can engage the fly mode. To enter fly mode, press Shift along with the tilde key. In this mode, you can use the W, A, S and D keys to navigate around your scene freely. Once you're at a desirable viewpoint, simply left-click your mouse to exit fly mode and lock in that position. This provides another effective method for circumventing zoom limitations in Blender. When working on a Blender scene, you may inadvertently press the spacebar, causing unexpected movements or disappearances of objects within your scene. To understand why this is happening, let's consider an example. Say you select an object and move it to a new location, then advance the timeline to frame 100. Now move the object again. In each of these instances, Blender automatically adds keyframes that record the object's transformations, such as position changes. The root cause of this automated behavior is the auto keying feature, which is usually toggled on via this button. When enabled, this feature automatically adds keyframes to the timeline for any changes you make to an object's properties, like position, rotation, and scale. Essentially any attribute that can be keyframed. Although the auto keying feature is invaluable when animating, it can become an annoyance if it's turned on unintentionally, especially if you're not aware of its capabilities or forget it's activated. Therefore, if you notice objects moving or changing in unexplained ways, it would be prudent to check the status of the auto keying button to see if it's enabled and toggle it off if necessary.